Hello everyone, in this video I'll be showing you the most OP new Amon build in Borderlands 4. Amon got some massive buffs this week, so we'll be breaking down the best choices now because his Forge Fists now do 76% more damage, and we can use these to set up some very powerful combinations here, so I'll be breaking down all the best choices and how to play this, as well as the gear, specializations, pretty much everything related to making this build feel strong. And yes, this is really fun to play. If you're a fan of Doom Eternal, the extra movement that you get from this is crazy. My head's blocking it, but we get a ton of overshield, so we're pretty survivable. And then we can use this hammer attack here, which sometimes looks funny the way you land it, but the damage that comes out of this is absolutely insane. So yeah, I'll be breaking down the best abilities here just as a brief overview of how this build is going to work. We're going to mostly be in the red tree, as this got the most buffs, most notably Onslaughter now getting a boost to its damage by 78%. And as well, our special skill of Molten Slam here got a 50% damage boost. And on top of this, its cooldown used to be 80 seconds, now it's 60 seconds. So we want to utilize these as much as possible. And we're also going to be dealing melee damage, which can trigger some of our other abilities here using My Touch is Death. Obviously, Berserk being probably the most powerful ability that Amon has, so we're going to utilize this a bit. But I also like to have a bit of Dragon's Breath in there, and basically all three of the skill trees. So you can choose the Capstone. The Molten Royal seem to be the most buffed up, although I've used the Stormcutter in a previous build, and with a certain class mod, this can actually be insanely powerful. So we're breaking down all the best choices here. With level 1, Discombobulate just is incredible. Giving our melee a critical hit chance is very powerful since our action skill here does melee damage, and Molten Slam is also melee damage as well. So giving this a critical hit chance is great. And once we get down here, the actual best augment that we have for this build is the Pyroclast for most instances. So whenever we activate our Onslaughter, we restore our health and shield, and we're surrounded by a storm that deals damage over time. And when we take out enemies, we increase the damage of the storm, and it gives us a action skill duration increase, which is great because this lets it last a little bit longer. If you're going against a boss, Felfrost actually got a massive boost in his damage by 71%. And that is pretty good tool. And so did Fulminating Fist, got a 69% damage boost as well. So both of these are actually pretty optimal now to go with, but I think this is the best. Now for levels 5 through 10, I like to take at least one level of the Gut Punch. This makes it so that your melee and Ordnance can apply weaken to an enemy, so they'll deal 40% less damage to you, and you deal 20% more damage to them. This is actually a huge boost to our overall survivability and damage, so it's worth taking. And Titanium Knuckles. It's actually probably better to actually go full in on 5 points of this, because the 40% melee damage and 20% skill damage is crazy when you consider that this counts as both. So we're double dipping there, getting a big boost to both from our melee and skill damage. Now at this point, I really enjoy the Forged in Steel. So whenever we use a Forge skill, which is our Molten Slam there, we get 6 seconds of invincibility, which is absolutely insane, especially when you consider some of the other abilities here, like the Pyroclast will fully restore our health and shield. So we can become pretty much immortal with this all combined together. I also like to grab at least one of the best defense here. So whenever we do melee damage, we get 3% of this is overshield. Now, this isn't actually worth investing too much in, because even if you put a few more points into it, you're typically going to max out your overshield pretty quickly. So there's no point in going any further in that. And I actually like to take that 1 point of the Gut Punch there, and then the other points in the skill tree are okay. Like this one gives you maximum shield capacity and overshield, which is actually pretty good for survivability. The Metal Urge here gives you increased action skill cooldown rate, which isn't actually that impactful for my testing. What burns within is actually a pretty good choice, because this gives us a boost to our overall fire damage by 12%, or you could go with a boost to your overall maximum shield. Now, I'd actually recommend, I like to go for the Molten Royal, but actually the Horcleave got a pretty big boost, so we can go into the Axe first. I recommend just grabbing Berserk. So whenever we activate our Forge skill, we become Berserk for a duration, gaining slow immunity and bonus cryo damage with gun damage and melee. So you'll see you freeze enemies often with this. It lasts for 15 seconds. However, once we activate there is only red, this is a kill skill. So whenever we kill an enemy while Berserk is active, we restore Berserk's duration by 9 seconds and increase bonus cryo damage from Berserk. So that's a 600% bonus damage per. If you get 10 kills, a 600% bonus cryo damage, which is actually pretty crazy. 30% is boosted up massively with this. And then for the other few points, I actually like to grab Rhyme Break. So whenever you just 1 point into this, it has a cooldown of 45 seconds. So whenever our shield breaks, we restore it, and then we do a detonation dealing cryo damage and freezing enemies. I actually found this to be pretty decent for your overall survivability. I also like to grab 1 stack of the Bloodlust here, which gives you Lifesteal, which is actually pretty decent, all things considered. But this one, Brimming Vigor, will also give you an increased maximum health capacity, which is really good too. And at this point, we can grab Horcleave for our action skill, because the damage from this is actually pretty nuts. Press and hold F to swing a massive forge axe, and then this will slam down doing cryo damage and its melee as well. And it'll pass through multiple enemies doing a actually ton of damage and also detonating. And my touch is death, which is actually crazy. So whenever Amon deals melee damage, there's a chance to activate kill skills. Now, I also really like going into the Scourge tree here because our Forge drones will actually count as melee damage, so they can actually activate this skill here. We're going to stick in the red skill tree because from the damage, it's actually much higher to stick within here. Next up, we can go grab the Molten Royal, but I also like to grab the Electrical Fire here, which whenever we burn in it, we also shock them. And at this point, we can grab the Dragon's Breath. So whenever we activate our Ordnance, our next gunshot is converted to fire damage, staggering enemies and causing increased damage dealt. This can become pretty crazy. If you don't like the Dragon's Breath builds, you can just go with the Catastrophe here, which will give us increased critical hit damage and critical hit chance whenever we burn and shock enemies, which we're going to do quite often. So Catastrophe probably ends up being a true bit better. I really like just the Dragon's Breath builds, which gives them quite a bit of extra damage. But you can go with this here to give yourself that. It gives you 15% critical hit chance and 30% critical hit damage whenever you burn and shock an enemy, which is pretty nice because that's free crits that you can get. I like Dragon's Breath, so you can go with that alternatively, but it's between those two there. Now, there's a few really good choices here. The Fist of Stone, whenever we deal melee damage, we restore a portion of our Forge skill cooldown. So that gives us our Forge skill back a little bit quicker. Not our action skill, but the Hammer Slam. Every melee does 5%. That's actually pretty crazy because we're going to melee often. And this will give us increased damage to enemies below 50% health, which is nice, but doesn't work here that well. And this actually allows us to take the Electrical Fire, and you can swap over Stormcutter at this point. Stormcutter is actually pretty strong too, especially there's a class mod that turns the shock damage into fire damage. But the damage boost actually got massive. It got massively boosted up. So you can actually, if you hit 5 enemies, you get a Axe and School Restoration. It allows you to spam this multiple times, but you got to get 5 enemies within it. Now you can swap into and take another skill tree here. There's a couple good choices here. So if we go into the blue skill tree, the Thrill just gives you a huge boost to your overall survivability. Scorch Kairos is nice as well, but I prefer going down to this skill tree here because Into the Fray is actually pretty crazy. Burning Ramparts will give you increased fire rate, which is good for damage, but with this, we get a 50% damage reduction when we're close to an enemy and 25% damage dealt whenever we're close to an enemy. That's crazy with a lot of the gear that we'll be using. Now, whenever we get down here, kill skill, we get increased melee damage, which is nice. Whenever Amon deals damage with a melee attack, his current gun reloads, which is also nice. But I like, you can take the Aiming Strike because this will apply the weakness that we do got from Gut Punch. It's actually probably best to go with the Harbinger here. You 10% melee damage per stack, so that's 5 stacks. 50% extra melee damage, which is actually pretty nice. And then if you want to, you can swap out and take Molten Royal, which is actually pretty powerful. This increases the radius of our Forge Slam and stores damage. The damage dealt is going to erupt on enemies. So the Stormcutter gives you a pretty nice forward slashing sword that you can hit multiple enemies and replenish your action skill with. This one I like a little bit more. It does a lot damage and it leaves those pyres there, which do damage over time. This is actually a pretty crazy skill. And I should mention the class mod. You can actually use a purple one here, and it works very well. There's one purple that will give you the bonuses into the green skill tree, which is pretty far. And you do get these bonuses. So the Endless Bombardment. Grenades have a chance to refund themselves on use. Heavy Ordnance have a chance to refund 1 ammo and damaging enemies. So what you can do with this is basically throw a bunch of grenades with it. It's not perfectly optimal, but it's fun, and that's what counts. But this gives you a few other points that boost up your overall damage on grenades. Now, you can go with a few other skills. I also enjoy going with all Forge skills can now be used once while on cooldown, plus 45% Forge skill damage, and the Assault Rifle damage is nice too. I'd rather overall just damage dealt or gun damage is possibly a lot better, but that can be a nice one. You can also go with the Raging Furnace, which will give you increased fire damage and turns all the capstone damage into fire damage, so that can be pretty effective as well. This one will give us 30% gun damage as well, which this one's actually probably a little bit better. But we want to get this all Forge skills can be used once on a cooldown so we can do the hammer attack once more. That becomes pretty crazy. Next, I guess I'll go over to all the gear here. So there's a few really good shields. So Watts for Dinner will give you the additional shock damage. And again, whenever we shock, we burn. When we burn, we shock. So this can be actually pretty good. It gives you a huge boost to the damage when we have overshield, and we have many ways to get it with our melee attacks. So Watts for Dinner is actually pretty nice. The Cinder Shelly is also pretty effective because you can get a boost to your overall damage reduction. With this, so whenever you take damage, you get a stack of Resolve that reduces damage taken by 2% per stack, so 50% damage reduction. We have 50% damage reduction at close range. It can actually be pretty tanky. It doesn't actually work to block 100% of damage, but very actually useful. Onion Shield also is nice here because whenever an armor segment breaks, you get invincibility for 2 seconds. So with this, we get four of these, 8 seconds of invincibility. We also have our action skill, which we can do that gives us 6 seconds of invincibility. And then we can spam our action skill once more because of this here. So we can actually get a lot of extra survivability using the Onion Shield. So those two actually work very well, but the Watts for Dinner will give you the most damage. And the Super Soldiers, which I'm using here, which can give you overshield whenever you deal damage, which just is nice for the extra survivability. So I guess Watts for Dinner is probably the true best damage option, but don't be afraid to use the Onion Shield as well because it gives you massive survivability. Now, I really like to go with an enhancement that increases the Jacob's ricochets, and then this one also has a 40% chance to ricochet non-critical hits, and then gun damage is boosted by 25%, which that gun damage boost can apply to our melee attacks and our action skill. So that's really good. I'm also using the Vampiric Slippy here. There's a lot of great heavy ordinances that you could use on this. Those are always a good choice. You can also go with the critical hit knife. You can also go with one here with high charges because there's a few different builds that work really well. But the reason I'm using Slippy, it has the Swordfish, which deals melee damage on detonation, and it'll keep flopping around dealing damage, and it does melee damage, so it's really good. And the lifesteal is increased by 17%. Pretty effective. And then finally, we have the triple bypass. This will do a Shock Nova. The Amped is a little bit better, or there's actually one that'll boost your melee damage, which I would recommend grabbing. I just wasn't able to get one with that here. There's ones that give you Overshield too, or Burst of Healing, but the increased melee damage is nice. Shock damage is all right too, but the 3 charge is the reason we want the triple bypass. And I guess to get into gear, Whiskey Foxtrot is actually pretty good for the overall damage. There's the Jacob's part there, which is combo. I also like the Wombo combo, best assault rifle in the game. My personal favorite gun, the one that I was using at the start, is the GMR, because it can get the Jacob's License accessory. It has massive damage, and it doesn't work like the other order guns. It's fully automatic. Hot Slugger, it's the best gun in the game. 30% damage boost times 3, 90% damage boost, crazy. Lucian's Flank, critical hits restore ammunition, and will also chain to multiple enemies, and it does fire damage. Can be pretty effective, especially with our boost to the overall fire damage. You can also go with the TK's Wave. The Jacob's critical hit bouncing to multiple enemies is great. The Oscar Mike is also quite effective. The Space Laser is a little bit better, but the fire damage fits thematically. Hellwalker also kind of works here. And you can even go with the Goalkeeper. You can charge up a shot. You can also just spam the shot button. It actually has pretty good damage, and it has 50% boosted damage when your shield is broken. So those can work well too. Chaosin does Chaosin things, so that's another weapon we could utilize. As for Specializations, now with Caffeine is going to be the best one, because with 3 Repkits, we can get our action skill back 75%, which restores our health, gives us we can get invincibility from it. Really great for just overall survivability. It's the best specialization. And next up is the Bare Arms. So this one will give us the benefits from gun damage onto our melee damage, which is also extremely nice. So we have things like our actions, our ability here, which gives us the increased gun damage by 25%. That's actually going to put 12.5% to our melee damage, which is a nice boost, and anything else that adds any gun damage. Groundbreaker, this is a very powerful specialization. So non-melee attack damage and slam damage are stored. Melee attacks and slam deal bonus kinetic melee damage based on storm damage, and then consume it. So you can stack up gun damage on an enemy, melee them, deal extra damage, and it's actually pretty effective here. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It has 5 seconds duration, so if you want to get this going quickly. I Am a Gun action skill will now benefit from our gun damage increases, which we had a few different gun damage increases, further increase our action skill. Makes it a little bit stronger. And Honed Mind can be nice, giving you a critical hit chance, but we can already critically hit on melee attacks. Alright, so we typically want to have the Hot Slugger out, because every time you get a kill, you get that 30% damage boost. You can reload the gun really quickly, but we're doing a melee build, so I would recommend getting our Forge skill slammed down in a good area of effect where you're going to hit multiple enemies there. You can see it actually hits some pretty good damage, especially with the Pyre there. It's actually pretty effective. And then our gun damage gets the boost from the Dragon's Breath, so yeah, you get an actually really nice boost to our overall damage here, and we're shredding through the boss pretty quickly. And then if we activate our action skill, we get all of our health back, and then we can go in. Basically going with a hammer shot, shoot your shotgun, it'll reload, and then you can punch them. It's pretty fun. I honestly really like this playstyle, and then you can go ahead with slamming your hammer once more, because you get that free hammer slam. Yeah, this is pretty good. It's not the most damaging in the game, because you're not utilizing anything that's broken that will get nerfed. This will only get buffed in the future. And now we're in Ultimate Vault Hunter 5, which is obviously a lot more challenging. The Slippery Grenade there is really nice, because it's going to give you that extra damage, because it'll flop around, basically, in that area. I hit myself with it there, but the nice thing is, if you ever hit yourself, you can activate your Forge skill here, and then you get invincibility for 6 seconds, which is great. We're doing pretty solid damage here, so yeah, it's not the most effective build, but it's a fun one. there's like no build on Amon that's going to be as broken as the other 3 characters, so you got to make do with what you got here. But you got grenades that are pretty effective. You got the Forge Fist, which can be pretty powerful, as you can see there, and creating that Forge Storm. That was an Ultimate Vault Hunter 5. Pretty powerful, especially you get the Dragon's Breath and all that there. It can hit hard. So there it is, the best new Amon build utilizing his punching and his red melee skill tree. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit the subscribe button below if you enjoy, and we'll catch y'all in the next one.